We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. It is a weird life in many ways, but it is surprising how soon one becomes accustomed to it. The sudden kettle drum staccato of the machine guns searching for working parties, the civil flare of the lights and the dense darkness which succeeds, the whistle of a salvo of shells overhead hardly makes you raise your head unless something is a bit close. Then, of course, you hug the bank, or the bottom of the trench, or wherever you happen to be at the moment, and wait till the row stops, or the lights go out, and carry on.
"5,000 men steal through the night, silent and swift. All is ghost-like, howling wind and rain. And who steer and who watch? Dozens of eyes. Soldiers, sailors, and seamen peer. Is the line straight? Are submarines near? Alone on a haunted bridge seem I, but other heads are there."
Good morning. The McMaster community joins with Canadians across our country, colleagues throughout the Commonwealth, and friends in nations including France, Belgium, and Poland to observe Remembrance Day, now a 104-year tradition. At McMaster, our service has national and international connections, but at its heart, it's here on campus on the traditional territories of the Mississauga and the Haudenosaunee nations, within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, I'm speaking to you from Alumni House, one of the original buildings on campus. From here, a short walk along the ravine will deliver you to Alumni Memorial Hall, a venue created as a memorial to the McMaster graduates and former students who gave their lives in service during the two world wars. If you walk up the stairs to the front door, you'll see on your right a plaque listing the 56 names of the McMaster Honor Roll. Today, for this service, we also include the names of two more members of the McMaster community who died during Canada's Afghan mission. Every November, this service of remembrance reminds us to see the honor roll as more than a list of names. This service is an opportunity to consider the people who gave so much to secure a lifetime of opportunity. The McMaster Alumni Association and the McMaster historians, librarians, and archivists have been working for years to assemble the stories of our fallen. I would like to share with you the story of George E. Matchett, better known to his friends by his middle name, Elwood. Elwood was born in Hamilton and attended Hamilton Collegiate Institute, where he was an exceptional competitive rifle shooter. After high school, Elwood explored different professions and options before enrolling in McMaster at the age of 22. He worked multiple jobs to pay his way through school, but his skill with a rifle remained elite. He founded and captained McMaster's rifle team, which finished third nationally. Elwood left McMaster for marriage and a job with Coca-Cola in the mid-1930s, when he also joined the Royal Hamilton Light Infantry Militia. He competed in the 1937 Bisley shooting matches in England, where he won 4 of the most prestigious competitions, prompting the Globe and Mail to describe him as one of the world's best shooters. The day after Germany invaded Poland in September 1939, 29-year-old Elwood Matchett enlisted in the RHLI, assuming the rank of captain. His regiment arrived in the UK in July 1940 and served the next 2 years on the south coast of England, completing additional training and counter-invasion exercises. On August 18, 1942, Elwood was one of 6,100 men, including nearly 5,000 Canadians, to cross the English Channel in a flotilla of transport and escort ships. His landing craft came ashore in France at White Beach near dawn on August the 19th, 80 years ago. On his way to lead a direct attack on a heavily defended German position, Elwood was killed by machine gun fire in the midst of a decisive defeat for the Allied forces. One of the finest riflemen in the world died without ever firing a shot at the enemy. Elwood Matchett was one of the first McMaster men killed in combat during the Second World War. The mission that took Matchett's life was, of course, the now infamous Dieppe raid. Today, we remind ourselves of the great price paid by George Elwood Matchett, by his friends and family, by his colleagues on the McMaster Honor Roll, and by the millions of people worldwide whose lives have been ended and affected by conflict. Today, we remember. On behalf of the McMaster Alumni Association and McMaster University, I want to thank you for being a part of our Remembrance Day tradition.
On the morning of August 19th, 1942, Allied forces launched Operation Jubilee, a major raid on the French coastal port of Dieppe, France. It was designed to test the Allies' ability to launch amphibious assaults on Hitler's Fortress Europe. They closed in on the port city and beaches east and west of Dieppe. In total, 6,100 troops stormed these beaches. Nearly 5,000 of them were Canadian. Tragically, it would turn out to be the single bloodiest day of the entire Second World War for Canada. Thinking they would have the element of surprise on their side, the Allies attacked at 5 different points along the coast of occupied France. They expected to fight their way into Dieppe. Instead, they were met with heavy enemy fire and suffered terrible losses on both the eastern and western flanks, as well as in the main attack on the town. Among the Canadians, only about 2,200 made it back to England, many of them wounded. Close to 1,950 of our soldiers became prisoners of war, and more than 900 gave their lives. It was a steep price to pay for what would be characterized as a failed operation. Still, the costly defeat yielded valuable lessons that were later applied when the Allies successfully returned to the shores of France in Normandy on D-Day in June 1944. The Canadians who fought in the Dieppe raid sacrificed much in their efforts to help bring peace and freedom to the people of Europe. On this 80th anniversary of their assault on Dieppe, we remember them and the more than 1 million men and women from Canada who served during the Second World War.
Honor Roll, 1914 to 1918. Henry Harold Allen. William K. Anderson. Stanley Howson Brocklebank. William Alexander Chisholm. Robert William Ewart Christie. John Andrew Dow Elder. John Harris Fairchild. Almond Minor Froome. Charles Arnold Grant. William Ernst Hinson. David Hughes. Wilfred John Jones. Robert Charles Kerr. Clarence Mackenzie. Harold Grant Masson. Wilfred Earl McKissick. Archie Alexander Morrow. William Sidney Rice. Roy Clark Steckley. Bernard Freeman Trotter. William Jonathan Wright. 1939 to 1945. Kenner Saul Earl. Murray Arthur Benetto. Nairn Stewart Boyd. Robert Edmund Dorsey. Robert John Edgar. Stanley David Godin. Stephen George Goatley. Robert Dalton Hurd. John Gilchrist Heinrich. Roy Howard Hilgartner. William Devereux Woodruff Hilton. Gordon Roseburg Holder. Charles Montgomery Holman. Frank Joseph Jensen. Richard Gordon Kelly. Charles William MacDonald. George Elwood Matchett. Albert Harry Milden. Albert Edmund McCreary. William E. McKeon. Donald Ray McLean. Rufin Calhoun McNairn. Henry Eugene Novak. Thomas Harold O'Neill. Byron N. F. Rawson. James Gordon Sloan. Charles Leonard Similewski. Robert Lloyd Telfer. Edmund MacLeod II. Frederick Edgar Wellington. John Watson Youst. James Allen Young. John Douglas Young. Harry George Zebedowski. Franklin Charles Suprig. The Afghanistan Mission. Richard Stephen Leary. Raymond Mark Ruckpaul.
Ici Repose by Bernard Freeman Trotter, McMaster Class of 1915. This was Bernard's last poem, the manuscript of which reached his parents the day after he was killed on May 7th, 1917. O happy dead, who sleep embalmed in glory, safe from corruption, purified by fire, ask you our pity? Ours, mud-grimed and gory, who still must grimly strive, grimly desire? You have outrun the reach of our endeavor, have flown beyond our most exalted quest. Who prate of faith and freedom, knowing ever that all we really fight for is just a rest. The rest that only victory can bring us, or death which throws us brother-like by you. The civil commonplace in which 'twill fling us to neutralize our then too marital hue. But you have rest from every tribulation, even in the midst of war, you sleep serene, pinnacled on the sorrow of a nation, in cerements of sacrificial sheen. Oblivion cannot claim you, our heroic, war-lustered moment, as our youth will pass, to swell the dusty hoard of time the stoic, that gathers cobwebs in the nether glass. We shall grow old and tainted with the rotten effluvia of the peace we fought to win. The bright deeds of our youth will be forgotten, effaced by later failure, sloth, or sin. But you have conquered time and sleep forever, like gods with a white halo on your brows. Your souls, our lodestars, your death-crowned endeavor, the spur that holds the nations to their vows.
Sego, Sewaguego. Greetings, everyone. Skanagoga, do you carry the great peace? Santi Smith, Dagalunyakwa, Nyungyats, Gaingehaga, Niwagohotsore, Wagenyata, Oswege, Nidawageno. My name is Santi Smith. As Chancellor of McMaster University, and on behalf of MAC, I am honored to share some reflections with you on this important day of remembrance. Nyawe, thank you for spending time with us today as we remember and give gratitude to veterans and their families. Let us unite our minds and heart to honor and acknowledge the sacrifices many brave individuals have made over the years in the line of duty to protect this land and the ideals of freedom and democracy. In remembering, we can access stories, histories, perspectives, and truths that are as informative and tangible today as they were a century ago. The need to acknowledge our interdependence, our humanity, and relationality is as important as ever. Many of us are connected to Remembrance Day through our ancestors who served in the 20th century conflicts. As I have mentioned in previous Remembrance Day services, this is a day when I feel the presence of my ancestors who served, including my great-grandfather. He was one of more than 4,000 Indigenous people who served during World War I. His name was Alexander George Smith, a Gayengahaga leader and warrior, born in Oswego, also known as Six Nations of the Grand River, in 1880. He voluntarily enlisted to fight in the Great War on the very first day possible, November 13th, 1914. He joined the 20th Battalion of the Canadian Expeditionary Force, and because he had already had military experience, he was commissioned as a lieutenant and served with great distinction in some of the most devastating and historic battles in Canadian history. And there are thousands of stories of servicemen and women that can connect us across generations as individuals and as the McMaster community to the sacrifices and legacies of the people who have served our nations in times of war, conflict, and in peace. Our program this morning includes images and letters of the McMaster men named on the honor roll. One of those names is Byron Rawson, and his story is one of great power and great tragedy. Barney, as he was known to his friends, was born in 1922. He attended Westdale Secondary School and then McMaster before serving in the Royal Canadian Air Force. He flew 51 bombing missions as a Lancaster pilot and earned the Distinguished Flying Cross twice. At 21, he became the youngest wing commander in the British Empire. After the war in Europe ended, Barney returned home to Canada in the summer of 1945 as a decorated officer and a war survivor. By almost any measure, he was one of the lucky ones. Still, he was haunted by the knowledge that his wartime service had resulted in the deaths of an untold number of German civilians. 2 days before Christmas, at his parents' home in Hamilton, Barney Rawson took his own life. He was 23 years old. Even though I know Barney Rawson only through these few details, I find the story of his death and the pain that caused it to be deeply moving. I can only imagine the devastation his family experienced, worrying about him through his time in service, seeing him return home safely, and then dealing with the pain of his sudden loss. It is easy to understand how traumas can travel through families. In 1945, the McMaster alumni family knew that Barney had died after the war and by suicide, yet still, and to its immense credit, included Wing Commander Rawson on the honor roll in Alumni Memorial Hall. The Commonwealth War Graves Commission and Osgood Hall, where Rawson was a student after returning from the war, did not initially acknowledge his death as a death in service. They only righted the wrong a few years ago in a change of heart that traces back in part to an insightful coroner in 1945. While the coroner accurately described the immediate cause of Barney's death, he also wrote that the death was the result of Rawson's failure to completely recover from the intensive duties and responsibilities in his war experience. It was a brave statement to make at the time. In his finding, the coroner acknowledged the ravaging power of what we now recognize as PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. To me, Barney Rawson's story helps make Remembrance Day feel connected to our contemporary society, even as our attention is focused on the service of earlier generations. While we have progressed so far in our collective understanding of mental health and wellness, we can see in our families, our communities, and in the news the tremendous price that so many of us pay for enduring conflict, trauma, inequities, and injustice. Rawson's story and the stories of so many other veterans living with PTSD shine a light on the importance of care and compassion and peacemaking processes for self and community, and the propagation of skana. Skana is a concept in Gayengeha, the Mohawk language, which means peace and balance. After the experience of conflict, loss, and taking of life, my ancestors conducted condolence ceremonies, the wiping away of tears, not only for their allies, but also their adversaries. Protocols were enacted to help the warriors and the soldiers ease the grief, loss, the mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual impacts of war away from their minds and bodies. Their burdens and traumas were acknowledged. The space around them was cleansed and cleared, opening a pathway to be able to enter back into society, to return to skana, a state of balance, of peace. The condolence process placed great importance on reestablishing productive and positive relationship building, and played a role in 18th century peace treaty negotiations among the Haudenosaunee, Canada, and the United States. Taking care of people and community holistically is an essential step of rebuilding and strengthening the home fires within self, family, and community. McMaster's Remembrance Day service provides an annual opportunity to reflect on our mutual responsibilities, especially to the people who serve and have served on our behalf, particularly to those with visible or unseen wounds. We are reminded that the renewal of peace is an ongoing cooperative action for all to embrace and to uphold. The men whose names constitute the McMaster Honor Roll, along with the thousands of other men and women who served and returned home, and others who continue to serve today, assume a truly impressive and selfless responsibility on behalf of the ideals of our nations. Today is a time to remember what they gave and consider what we must give in return, for it is our shared responsibility to build a society capable of sustaining, continually actioning peace, and assisting those who are struggling to find skana. We take a small step toward that goal by coming together today and remembering the sacrifices of the men on the McMaster Honor Roll and all veterans. Skanagoa, may great peace be with you. Onegiwahe. Goodbye for now.
With all of the excitement gone, one is dreadfully weary. We were airborne 8 hours and 40 minutes, working under an awful tension. When I got out of the kite, I could scarcely stand. I find it impossible to sleep after a trip like that. It was later learned that the rate had fallen well short of expectations. Though the center of Stuttgart and some suburbs were struck, many of the bombs fell in open country. And of the armada of 863 aircrafts that took part, a total of 27 Lancasters and 10 Halifax were lost, mostly to German night fighters eager for fierce combat.
It is no use pretending. I am heartily sick of it all. There is not much glory, only sordid destruction. I look upon this war as a very dirty job, which definitely must not recur. So many are the narrow escapes that it has seemed a miracle has happened to save me. It is finally getting on my nerves. I am no longer the man I was. However, I will get over it.